Thank you, everybody, for joining us today for our webinar, Who Do First Generation College Students Turn to for Support? Implications for Research and Practice. My name is Hudi Kalankarian. I am a Senior Research Associate at the Community College Research Center. I'm joined today by my colleague, Melissa Herman, a Senior Research Assistant and a doctoral student at Teachers College. And we're very fortunate to be joined by our colleagues from Cerritos College, Shalina Fisher, Department Chair of Counseling, Counselor and Associate Professor, Raquel Lizarraga Christensen, School Relations Coordinator, Office of Enrollment Services, and Tracy Ukita, Counselor, Associate Professor, and Guided Pathways Faculty Coordinator. Thank you to our panel for being here. Melissa and I are going to kick things off today with some of the research findings from our most recent work on first-generation college students. And then we're going to have an engaging discussion with Shalina, Raquel, and Tracy about the work that they do serving first-generation college students at their college. I do want to acknowledge our other research partners. On the research end for this project, we work with Michigan State University, Dr. Ken Frank and Karen Clark. We have collected data at Cerritos College, Fresno City College, Fresno State, and California State University, Fullerton. So thank you to all of our partners who make this project possible. Let me start with a little background about our work on first-generation students. At CCRC, we are conducting a study called Understanding the Support Networks of First-Generation College Students. It is an exploratory project that is funded by the Institute of Education Sciences, and there are three overarching goals. The first main goal is to describe the support networks and help-seeking behaviors of first-generation students at the 4 public colleges in California that I just mentioned. We also look at the relationship between support networks, help-seeking behaviors of first-generation students, and their post-secondary outcomes. And all of this is with the intention of generating insights that colleges may use to strengthen their existing services or develop new approaches to supporting first-generation students. This work is done in a mixed methods approach. We have 3 forms of data collection that all come together to serve those objectives. Our main data collection is a longitudinal social network questionnaire that we first administered in spring of 2022 at a cohort of, for a cohort of first-generation students at each of those 4 public colleges and universities in California. We asked the same group of students to complete the survey again in spring of 2023, and I'll say a little bit more in a minute about what that survey entailed. Each of those semesters, we also conducted interviews with a subset of the survey respondents, digging deeper into the relationships that they identified in the survey. The final strand of work is quantitative. It is ongoing as we speak. It's an analysis of student unit record data to look at that relationship between students' networks and their outcomes, such as year-to-year persistence in college. And like I said, that work is ongoing. Today, we're going to be focusing on our first research question: who do first-generation college students turn to for academic and non-academic support? And we're going to be drawing on our social network survey data, specifically the first wave of data, which included a little over 2,000 students, as well as our interviews with 58 students from that same semester. Let me say a little bit more about what a social network survey entails, just for some additional background. We asked students on our survey 2 questions, 2 network generator questions. We asked them to list up to 7 people who they've turned to for academic help or support, and 7 people who they've turned to for non-academic help or support. I should note that these questions had some additional context, and they had additional questions leading up to these that got into more of the detail of what we meant by academic help and non-academic help. But the key thing here to keep in mind is that we asked students to tell us who they turn to for support in these different contexts, and we left it up to them to bound who they identify, meaning they did not have to just list college-based individuals. They could list anybody that they wanted to identify as part of these networks. And that really helped us identify their authentic help-seeking behaviors. During interviews then, we probed on the relationship with each of these individuals, asking them follow-up questions like, why did you choose to go to so-and-so for help? And can you describe your last conversation with so-and-so? It's important to note that we are approaching this work from an asset-oriented perspective. Often research on first-generation college students takes a more deficit-oriented approach, thinking about what students may be lacking because their parents do not have college degrees as they enter the college journey themselves. Our work is really focused on understanding what strengths, what assets first-generation students bring with them to college. And to do that, we relied heavily on USO's framework of cultural capital, both in our research design and in our research analysis. So I'm going to turn to begin talking about our findings. Before I do, I'm going to check the chat real quickly just to make sure that everything is okay technically. Great. I do want to note that we welcome you adding your questions to the chat. My colleague Melissa is monitoring the chat, and we will be having a Q&A section at the end where hopefully we'll be able to address as many of your questions as possible, and we'll certainly welcome any comments after as well via email. Okay. All right, so let's get into the findings. I'll give some high-level overviews of what we found in terms of who students turn to for support, and then turn it over to Melissa to say a little bit more about the more common relationships that we identified. Well, students identified over 26 different types of connections in response to the question, who do first-generation college students, who do they turn to for academic support? So that first network generator question that asked them to list the individuals that they turn to for academic help, wide range of responses. Some we may expect, some were interesting and not as common, but really informative. So things like social media groups, coworkers, people they lived with, professional relationships like their doctor or their lawyer. A wide range of stakeholders come through. Interestingly, similar range in response to the second network generator question relating to non-academic support networks. So the frequency with which these different stakeholders were identified varies, but the overall range and nature of the individuals was very similar for both of the network generator, or in response to both of the network generator questions. I do want to point out the references to family here, again, because it complicates what we typically think of when we think of first-generation college students. We often associate them with parents and parental education levels. But as you can see here, in both networks, siblings, cousins, grandparents, aunts, uncles, all come through as potential sources of support, both for academic help and for some of the non-academic issues that also shape their academic journeys. And interestingly, 70% of our respondents indicated that they had siblings or extended family members who either attend or have attended college. And 60% of those who said they had family who either attend or have attended college said that they actually turned to those family members for advice about college-related issues. So I bring that up again because it provides some nuance the way we think about first-generation students and what they know about college from their family relationships. Okay, let's zero in on the more commonly listed connections for both network types. You can see here that when it came to academic support, students most often listed their friend from high school or childhood. Close to 40% of students listed at least one friend from that peer group. Students also talked about friends from college, again, their siblings, and even parents to come up in response to questions about their academic needs. Interestingly, just under 30% of students listed an academic advisor at the college when it came to turning to somebody for academic support, and only 20% or so turned to a faculty member for academic support. Not very high numbers, but with respect to, compared to other college staff, these were the most commonly listed types of stakeholders. Okay? So among college staff, academic advisors, and next faculty were the most commonly listed source of support, but taken just in absolute terms, not very many students listed either stakeholder when it came to academic support. In terms of non-academic needs, students said that they often turn to parents, as we may expect. Close to half of students listed at least one parent as a source of non-academic support. They listed also friends from high school and childhood, those peer relationships coming into college really being powerful. Siblings came up as especially important when it came to non-academic needs. I'm going to turn it over now to Melissa, who's going to dig deeper into these more commonly identified relationships, pulling from our qualitative data and what we learned there about what makes these relationships important to students, why they turn to them for support, and what we can learn from them. So again, to recap, these common relationships were peer groups, extended family members, siblings, parents, college advisors, and faculty. Melissa, over to you.
Thanks, Hori. Can you click forward to parents? Thank you. All right, so I'm going to dig a bit deeper into these 5 of these most important relationships that we found in our study. And just to obviously contextualize these comments, they obviously don't, hold true for all students. There was definitely a broad range of perspectives on how students view these relationships. But we're going to talk about overall patterns that we saw in the data and some of the ways that we think, or the ways that we found that these relationships were positive sources of support for students, and potentially how institutions can think about leveraging these relationships in their support for students. And hopefully, add nuance to the ways that these relationships are perceived by first-generation college students, because we really did see the way that family and community relationships can be assets for students in their college-going journey. Oh, and I do see a question already being raised about first gen. So I'll just say for context that we were using the federal definition of meaning that a student didn't have a parent or guardian that completed a college degree. So to dive into parents, this might be an obvious one, but it's, it was a complex story. Not all parents of the students that we interviewed were supportive of their child's interest in pursuing a college degree and would have preferred that their child went straight into the workforce. But we did find that when parents were present, which, they were listed close to 50% of the time for students, they were a key provider of emotional support. And students really acknowledge that while their parent might not have been able to help them with very specific academic needs, the students really recognize that their parental support was positively influencing their academic experience, and in some very concrete ways. You know, they said that their parents helped them stay on track with assignments, that their parents helped them with goal setting. Students also kind of saw their parents as storytellers who kind of use their own stories around their challenges to encourage their child to pursue higher education. And students really found that to be an important source of sort of encouragement and aspirations. Corey, can you bring up the quote? So I wanted to share this first quote about a student who acknowledging that, you know, her mom might have had some limitations in terms of understanding what she was doing in college, but she specifically said, you know, her mom is there to motivate her, to make sure she's still on track. And it's those conversations that, you know, help her mom be there for her and make sure that she, you know, keeps going in her pursuit of higher education. And so, you know, we found this to be a pretty typical response from students, that, you know, their parents really were able to provide this type of key sort of emotional and, you know, close to academic support in terms of that encouragement and their ability to stay on track with their assignments and to keep persisting in school. So next, let's turn to siblings and cousins. Like Corey mentioned, these were really common relationships that students mention both on their survey and in interviews. We found that siblings, cousins, and other extended family members often did have college experience and were able to broker relationships for students on campus. You know, families were not always 100% a source of support. Sometimes they were a source of difficulty for students, in particular when there were conflicting expectations around, you know, maybe relatives thinking they should spend less time on schoolwork and more time on family responsibility. But still, you know, many students on the survey listed that their siblings were a source of both academic and non-academic support, and that they really provided advice. They encouraged them to join on-campus activities. They helped them with things like managing their schedules and figuring out how to complete paperwork. So these relatives were a really important source of support for students, both academically and non-academically. And I'll share one quote from a student who said this about her cousin. Her cousin had graduated from a four-year college out in California, and she said that her cousin prompted her to join programs at school and to create that peer group on campus, and that was, you know, that was the sort of encouragement and advice that she needed to kind of take advantage of things that her school had to offer. So next, we'll turn to friends from childhood and high school. We found that many students on the survey listed friends from childhood as a key source of both academic and non-academic advice and support. And we found in particular that, you know, students who had childhood friends that were then also in college were able to really help them and give them very tangible advice about how to navigate the experience of being a college student. And I'll share one sort of typical quote from a student. Thank you, Lori. So this student talked about a friend of his from growing up who was at another university, but that they spoke frequently, and he said that his friend encourages him to go to the events that his college offers. He encourages me to talk to people, talk to teachers, and that he felt like this friend was having a really overall positive influence on his experience at college. He also provided another example of this student, the friend being able to provide him with very specific study skills advice, you know, what to do if a professor tells you that you could bring a cheat sheet to your exam, you know, like these very concrete things that, you know, a friend might be able to tell you and give you that kind of advice you need when you need it. So he said that was a really positive influence for him. So lastly, I'm going to turn to the top two institutional relationships that came up on the survey and, in interviews as well. So I'll just say again, advisors were not always exclusively a positive experience for students. There were many students on the survey who indicated that, it was challenging sometimes to get academic help on campus. And often in an interview, they noted that it might be hard to get an appointment with an advisor, or the appointments were short, and so they didn't get all the help that they needed within the appointment. But on the positive side, when students listed these relationships on their survey, they were a really positive source of lots of different type of information for students and connecting them with other resources that were important for them. And I guess I would note a few things about advising that students shared with us. First of all, that students felt a big difference when they were able to meet with the same advisor on multiple occasions, because they shared more information over the course of the relationship when they were meeting with the same person multiple times. And this really positioned the advisor to be able to serve the students more effectively. So they were able to understand, okay, this student actually needs a referral to counseling. This student really needs this type of career advice. So that longer term relationship allowed the advisor to really target the advice and the relationships that they were helping the students to develop. The other things I would note is that in the interviews in particular, students spoke about targeted programs that they were in. So in California, it's EOP or EOPS, but programs on campus that assign specific advisors for certain populations of students. Students noted that those programs were really meaningful for them, that those advisors were really able to help them a lot. So that was one major piece that students mentioned. And the other thing that came up in student interviews was actually students' ongoing relationships with high school advisors or college access professionals that they had relationships with from high school, that those relationships taught them how to interact with advisors. And so a lot of those students were able to kind of take better advantage of academic advising in college, and to take advantage of the resources that were there. So there was this interesting sort of nexus between students that had those relationships in high school, being able to carry some of the skills that they learned through those relationships into college. And I'll just share one quote about academic advising. I think this is, this student was a pretty typical student in that she talked about an advisor who she had been able to meet with on multiple occasions. So after that, she said, she was able to help me determine not just what classes I should take, but also really introduce her to programs that were related to her career interests. And this actually led to her getting hired for a summer job. And so in this type of example where there was this ongoing relationship, the advisor was able to really do a lot for the student. So lastly, let's turn to faculty. So, as Huri noted before, faculty were not cited that often. It was about 20% of survey respondents identified faculty as one of the places that they turned to for academic support. But when they did mention faculty, these relationships were really powerful. Students talked about, professors being able to broker connections for them, and being able to really be most effective when professors embedded some campus resources into the courses that they were taking. And so that seemed to be one place where it was really instrumental, where, professors were systematically sort of connecting the dots for students and helping them connect to other services on campus as part of their courses. And so I'll just give one last quote about that. So this was a student, and we were asking her, how did she learn about all the resources on campus that she was taking advantage of? And she said, it's usually when they're explicitly told to me. So she gave this example about her communications professor giving them a tour of the library as part of their course. and their library had a lot of offerings. She mentioned tech support, the learning center. So she said it was because of this professor embedding this tour in the course that she came to know about all of these services on campus, that she then went on to really take advantage of those opportunities. So I think from there, I will turn it back to you, Lori, to talk through the implications.
Great, thank you so much, Melissa. Yes, so we are going to get into a whole lot more in terms of implications with our panel in just a moment, but I do want to provide some high-level takeaways. The first is just related to our definition of first generation. Again, we often lump first-gen students into one category and think of them in terms of parental education levels, and even that has complexities, as already I think was noted in the chat. Let's add, though, the nuance of sibling relationships, extended family, and how they have experience. They may or may not have experience with higher education system. Parents, siblings, and other family, as we've noted, can be asset-rich connections and can broker connections to campus-based services. So broadening that definition of first gen and really thinking about the nuances there is important, especially among the research community. In terms of takeaways for colleges, thinking about intake processes, intake questionnaires, outreach efforts, how can those go beyond parental units? Again, leveraging those sibling, cousin, aunt, uncle relationships that already are present and that may have some of the seeds for understanding the college pathway that can be further leveraged. Colleges are typically thinking about relationships with high schools, and we'll hear more from Cerritos how they do that. And oftentimes we think of that at the counselor level or administrator level, and all of that can be very powerful. How can we add peer relationships to that? Is there a way to really leverage those high school peer relationships that clearly are so important to the students who responded to our survey? As Melissa said, advising, especially from targeted support programs like EOP, TRIO, these types of services are powerful. Removing barriers to accessing these types of services can really be important and empower advising staff to have a greater role in students' support networks. And similar story for faculty. If there are ways to embed structures connecting students to resources within course materials and programming and really streamline the role of faculty in connecting students with these types of campus-based services, we can position faculty to have a stronger role in student support networks. So some high-level takeaways, much more to come from this project. This is our first webinar. Our first paper will be out soon. We'll be sharing a whole lot more at upcoming conferences and hope to see you there. We'll be at AERA. We will be at the NASPA conference on student success in higher education in Anaheim for those who are from California. And so much more to come as we continue to analyze our Wave 2 data and our student unit record data. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to, I'm going to invite our panelists to turn on their cameras and join me, and we'll have a conversation with them about how some of these findings pertain to the work that they do at Cerritos College. And we'll go ahead then and stop sharing now, and we can proceed to our discussion. Selena, Tracy, Raquel, thank you so much for joining me today. So I introduced you folks by title, but if you could say a little bit more about yourselves, your work at Cerritos, and how your work intersects with first-generation students, that would be really helpful, I think, for folks. Shalina, maybe we can start with you.
Sure. So my name's Shalina Fisher, as was mentioned already. I am currently the department chair here at Cerritos College. That is just one of the hats that I wear, which is, like many colleagues, of the life of a counselor. So my role that I was hired to do was as a counselor. Within that role, I actually work with different special populations, one within our guided pathways, specifically for arts and humanities, but I also work with our students with our Emoja program, which is a program specifically designed for African-American students or those a part of the diaspora, looking into themselves. I also work with our student athlete population as well. So within those different roles and hats that I wear, everything I do is with first generation students. Cerritos has a large population of first gen. And it's the connection with them through each of my interactions. It's really helped me to understand not only myself as a counselor, but also the role that I have as a department chair to continue to bring professional development to our division.
Thank you so much, Lena. Raquel, would you like to go next?
Sure. So my name is Raquel Lizarraga Christensen. I'm the school relations coordinator at Cerritos College. And so the role is primarily responsible for promoting the college and its programs. So in our enrollment services division, we're really coordinating recruitment activities. We're collaborating with our K-12 partners. We really aim to engage with the students and families and guide them through the matriculation process to attend. And in the role, the focus is really working with those students and families and promoting the resources and programs that our college has, as well as like hosting events to provide the access and the information to our students and families in the community. And the latest data I received was about 55% of our students are first generation students. So really almost like more than half we're outreaching to in this population. So it's really embedded into everything that we're doing at the college. And creating that community with these students and families that may be accessing college for the first time. So, okay. Thank you.
And Tracy, over to you.
Hi, Tracy Ukita. I'm a counselor specifically in the Career Services Department, which is under the larger Counseling Services Division. I also serve as a faculty coordinator for our Guided Pathways efforts here at Cerritos College. My role, very similar to Shalina in terms of just how I interact with students as a counselor, but also thinking about those broader implications when it comes to my work in Guided Pathways. So as Raquel mentioned, we have about 55% of our student population as first generation to college. That's been pretty consistent over the years. It's typically around 50 or a tiny bit above 50%. So for us, it's just kind of who our students are. And we hear, of course, some of their struggles, but their successes as well, and the supports that they turn to when we meet with them individually as students. The counselors at Cerritos College, almost all of us are teaching pretty much every term. So we also have students that we're meeting with consistently over the course of a semester in our classrooms as well. But it's a very enriching experience, whether you're a counselor meeting with a student individually or in a classroom, or helping to kind of coordinate larger programs for the college.
Thank you. And thank you, Tracy, for bringing up that perspective of the strengths that first-gen students bring with them to college. I was going to ask the panel if you could say a little bit more about what you see as the assets or the strengths that first-gen students come to college with. We certainly tried to take that perspective in our research work, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on that.
I would definitely say resiliency, curiosity, creativity, innovation. They're willing to put in the work. They know that they have to go to numerous sources in order to move and navigate through this system. So definitely they rely heavily on their navigational capital, their social capital to make it through. I think, though, that also it's those people who they build trust with. So individuals that they know they can have genuine connections with, shared experiences with, whether that be friends on campus, their faculty, their counselors, support staff. We have a custodian here, and students love that individual, and that individual has helped them move through and create networks and pathways for them to actually move through. So I would definitely say resiliency, and figuring out how to manage this whole world of college, which is a completely different language for them.
I was going to say the same in terms of resiliency and the resourcefulness that they demonstrate. And just a quick shout out to Kevin Butler, the custodian that Shalina was talking about. He's absolutely amazing. I would also point though to our students, and you really reference this a lot in the research study that you did, that they turn to each other a lot for support. So their willingness to embrace kind of interdependence. They are cheerleaders for each other a lot of the times, and I think that's really very special. Also, I've noticed that they tend to be, they're humble about what they don't know, and they're also very proud of it having the opportunity to kind of be in this position to pave the way for some of their other family members.
And I'd like to just add that, they're the first to come to college, but they're in a lot of situations, they're often bringing their entire family or their network of friends as well. So I think we have the tagline like first, but not the last. And so essentially when you're outreaching to these students, you have the potential to be working with their entire family and their friend network too. And they essentially become like the influencers for the college, which is really exciting.
That's great. And Raquel, thank you for bringing up the role of family and how Cerritos thinks about that. I was actually going to ask you to elaborate on what Cerritos does by way of engaging family in, especially around getting students recruited and enrolled at your institution.
Okay, great. I got a lot to say on this. So at the college, we have a Promise program, which allows students from eligible school districts to receive 2 years free at the college, as well as really hands-on support throughout, coming to the college. So we worked really closely with our K-12 partners, and we actually have staff on their school sites. They're known as site bridging liaisons. And so they're there on a weekly or bi-weekly basis for all of the eligible schools. And they're working with these students, hosting presentations about the college, hosting workshops to help them apply, complete their financial aid, complete their orientation, and even enroll, right? Because these students are enrolling in their fall classes and summer classes while they're in high school. And so having them on site at the K-12 provides a lot of access to the students. And through this program, also, we wanted to make sure that we're reaching the families where they are too, because the families aren't in the classrooms with these students, right? So we may have those resources there in the classroom, but we really wanted to be intentional about reaching the families. So we worked with our K-12 partners, and they've provided the family emails, the family mailing list. And so we started sending, just like one, not like a bunch of emails, right? Like an email notifying them about the program and the opportunities that they have at the college, as well as like how to join a presentation virtually or in person to start to join. And we've received a lot of good feedback from that. Every year we hear, we're like, oh, I've never heard of the program. But once we started sending out these mailers to the high school parents, to their emails, we started seeing a lot more engagement within the community. And we've also hosted presentations at Cerritos College so they could get to know the college, but we really wanted to also host these presentations on their high school campuses, right? Because they may feel more comfortable there. They may not feel comfortable coming to the college. It may not be close to them. They're getting off work, right? So if we go to where they're at and where they're comfortable, we could promote the college on their campuses. We've also done some pivoting, right, with COVID. We started doing those virtually. And we've also have a text app where we were reaching out to students, and we allowed their families to also join that text app, right? Because we know their families are their biggest supporters, or their siblings, their parents. So we would send reminders when a deadline was coming up, or if there was a workshop available, or when our staff was going to be at their school. So we were sending regular nudges to these students and their families. And we've noticed that we had a lot more engagement with the parents and the support system than we do with the student, right? And it may be because these families may be working 2 jobs or may not be able to come to the campus and ask these questions, but they were able to set aside some time and just send a quick text. Like, while we're not at work, we're still receiving that. And the next morning, we're able to respond in a timely manner. And so we did see a lot of family engagement in those texts. And I think that really led to, them reminding their student to complete those steps. Oh,
That's
and
really
we're also,
interesting.
sorry, so much.
No, please.
We're also, for the students that aren't able to participate in the Promise program, our staff has been really intentional this past year in working with those schools that are not eligible for the Promise, and we're sending our staff to those schools as well, so they still receive support from Cerritos College and are able to learn about the programs and resources at our school.
Well, that's good to hear. And I was just going to say, you hear about nudging a lot with respect to students, but I'm not sure I'd heard a whole lot about nudging for families and just broader than even parents. So that's really intriguing example. Thank you. And Tracy and Shalina, I think both of your roles in counseling also interact with families, especially on family expectations and how those relate to students' education planning and career exploration. Tell me a little bit more about how you think about the role of family in these conversations.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, a lot of helping students kind of navigate their way through some of those conversations that they often have with their family members about different expectations in terms of how much time they might need to spend on school versus work or other family responsibilities, like Melissa mentioned earlier in the presentation. So it can be really challenging. I mean, we probably don't have anything earth-shattering to share here for those of you who do work consistently with first-generation college students. Know that they're oftentimes having to just kind of balance these different expectations, but also many times kind of manage some misunderstandings, misconceptions about college, the amount of effort and time that they might need to dedicate toward their studies in order to be successful. When it comes to career decisions, there's often a lot of expectations there too, and having the student really think through, what they want to prioritize. In some cases, it's honoring their family's wishes and what they might want the student to really pursue in terms of a possible career path. In other cases, it's to coach them in terms of having conversations with their family about this other possible career path that might not be very familiar to their family, and to help them understand that it could still be a very viable career path. So we do have those conversations a lot with students, but interestingly, we've been having those conversations a lot with the families too. So I'm not sure if folks across the country are seeing this a lot more. I certainly have. And, having cousins, siblings, parents, aunts and uncles come in with the student and ask a lot of questions. And in many cases, they're just there to kind of listen and offer some moral support and learn themselves. In other cases, it's not maybe quite as supportive, but I will always take it as a good sign that at least they're interested in finding out a little bit more about how the college thing works. But I'll defer to Dr. Fisher for their input here.
And how I also look at that question is thinking about it with the end. So we invite family members to graduation ceremonies, different types of commencement award ceremonies, and those types of things where we include the family and the supporters in the community. I think that also ensures that we continue that generation. So as students right now, they're finishing their applications for graduation, they're petitioning. And a lot of students, especially first generation, it's like, it's a community college. It doesn't mean anything. It's like, no, it doesn't mean that much to you, even though you've met this mark. It means a lot to your family. And it means a lot to those individuals that are in the crowd that may look like you and think that they didn't have a way. So it's definitely looking at how just that one individual and opening their eyes that they're impacting the scope of the world that they live within, and how it can impact those next generations of first gen students, of students that look like them, to pave that path for themselves, and also that they need a support system in order to do it. By doing so, by being a part of that community type aspect, it really does bring other people in so that we can continue to not just have, first gen realistically may not even be a thing in the future, but it's currently something now that we're working with. And it's how do we continue to build those pathways and pipelines for our students to be successful and their communities.
All right, thank you. Very interesting. The way that the college engages with family. How about peers? We saw a lot in the research the important role of peers. I know there's the ASK program at Cerritos. Raquel, can you tell us a little bit more about ASK?
Yeah, of course. It's a student support program for the students. Through Cerritos Complete, all students are required to take math and English and pass that in their first semester. And we provide an opportunity for those students who may not have been fully prepared for college or, weren't ready for that level of workload of taking those classes. We allow them a second chance to stay in the program by joining ASK. And so through the ASK program, they are assigned a mentor, so a peer that they're working with while they're taking those classes again in the spring. They receive that tutoring service as well. They currently have 16 mentors that are working with the students in the program. And for students that are in the ASK program, they have a really high success rate with their mentor. And it is 85% success rate in passing math and a 88% rate in passing their English class when they are paired with the mentor from the ASK program. And so it just provides that additional support that these students may need as they're taking these classes on campus.
Wow. It's a very intensive too, support structure, as I understand it. Right. Tracy, you mentioned, and I know we're getting close to, I can't believe it, the hour being almost up. We'll spend another 5 minutes or so with the panel, and just want to remind folks, if you have any questions, to add it to the chat, and then we will, Melissa will facilitate a session with the panel addressing your questions for the last few minutes of the session. Tracy, you mentioned that you are the Guided Pathways Coordinator, and Shalina, you also noted your role in implementing Guided Pathways. Could you say a little bit more about where the college is in your implementation, specifically around your success teams, and how you see the success teams being a critical role in supporting your first-gen population?
Sure. So we are about 4.5 years into our Guided Pathways implementation. I'm one of 2 faculty coordinators. We also have a couple of lead administrators. And we have now operationalized our success teams. We're, a third, 2.5 years into our success team structure. Our success teams, like many, of course, are cross-functional. They include co-leads with a full-time counselor as one of the co-leads. And counselors in the California Community College system are faculty members, and they are partner with a academic manager, usually a dean of an academic division. And then included in that success team include other full-time counselors. I myself am on 3 teams and I lead one. So there's like a career counseling liaison to each team, transfer center liaison to each team. These are all counselors, other academic counselors as well. We have an academic support representative who could be a full-time or part-time employee of the college working essentially for our tutoring hub on campus. We have our success coaches who are classified professionals who do a lot of kind of the triaging and outreach on behalf of the teams. We are very fortunate to have a general faculty representative. So we have academic discipline faculty on these teams as well. And they play a large role too in just reaching out to students. They use Pronto for their communication with students, reaching out to them every week, sharing tips that they believe will be helpful for students, and just kind of taking care of questions that come their way. And then we also have a data coach, and on our teams, our data coaches are all faculty members as well. Last but not least, we have graduate student interns. So we have social work interns, grad students who are working to complete their MSW degrees. So they're pretty robust teams, and each team kind of has its own little personality and certain subsets of the population that they really want to focus on. Admittedly, it's actually pretty challenging for us to specifically identify our first generation students. We do have a dashboard that our institutional research office offers where we can get more high-level data about our first generation students. And we're working toward being able to have an identifier in our student success management system. We use Navigate 360 from EAB. And we are looking into the possibility of being able to at least have a tag or a category for our first generation students. I should have mentioned. So our success teams are really tied to our meta majors. So we have 8 meta majors at Cerritos. We call them learning and career pathways. And so again, I'm on a few of those teams. Shalina is the counselor lead for arts, humanities, and communication. One of the teams that we have is actually not a true meta major in the sense that there's no major really attached to it. It's really for our students who on paper or in our student information system is identified specifically as undecided. So.
Thank you, Tracy. Shalina, is there anything you want to add? Better. Awesome. Okay, well, I'm going to turn it over then to Melissa to see if there are questions from the audience that we can address at this point.
There were several questions about the Ask program. So I'm wondering, maybe just collapse them into one question. If you could say a little bit more about the peer mentor or the person that they're assigned to, sort of what is the role of that person, and are they more a mentor or a tutor? And how do you sort of ensure that the student is meeting with that person?
Of course, great question. So there are program requirements for the students that are in Ask. So they are required to attend scheduled meetings with their success mentor, which is a tutor for the program. So they're able to do this a variety of ways, right? So they can, they keep it pretty flexible for the student because they want to make sure that they are able to complete this. So they're able to do a scheduled meeting via email or a chat or a video conference and even a phone call. And they're able to do this bi-weekly, if not more. So if the student needs more support, they can also schedule more time. The students are also submitting a report to update the mentor about their success in the course. So, right, so they're giving them updates about their grades and they're discussing how they could improve along the way. And they also are required to complete online tutoring and workshops, and they're able to track the ones that the students are completing. So they are able to nudge them if they need to do more, or if they're doing, nudge them along the way to ensure that they're being successful. And I forgot to mention, they also provide a bookstore voucher when they complete the requirements too. So there's like a little extra incentive there.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Okay, let me see if we can get at least one more question. One of the things that came up a lot was sort of the connection between advising and other services or other resources on campus. And I'm wondering how you all think about strategies or approaches between advising and other offices to, make sure that students kind of get all the services that they need.
So we have a couple of different ways in which we do that. Our success coaches, they will actually do outreach to different classes and go within as leads of our different learning pathways. Are you all struggling to hear me?
So, so yeah, there's a lot of kind of reaching out across different programs and services on campus. It's a little challenging. I don't know if this is a very common experience, but certainly in my experience at a few different community colleges here in California, we have counselors, academic advisors in some places that are assigned to different areas across campus, different departments, different student services divisions, and we do our best to try to share resources and information and refer students. When it comes to our success teams, we actually have kind of pulled out a lot of the students in our populations that would normally be attached to an LCP, a learning and career pathway, and a success team. If they're a part of what we often refer to on our campus as a special population, so EOPS, Puente, Umoja, veterans, they kind of have their own teams that connect with them. But again, we do a lot of referrals back and forth to different programs. We share a lot of resources as well. There's a lot of training that overlaps when it comes to counseling and having bi-monthly kind of training meetings for all counselors so that we are familiar with the same information, can share that information with our students across the board.
Thank you. I see one other question that came in from the chat about, I guess, the interaction between your learning management system and first generation students, if you have anything specific to add about that.
I don't know about anything specific. I honestly feel like all of our students are struggling to figure that out and navigate. We use Canvas, and so there are videos that students can watch. A lot of times, ultimately, though, they are asking their faculty members, as counselors, any staff member that they can find when they do run into difficulty in navigating a Canvas. But I feel like we've gotten to a point where students, even coming in, are pretty familiar with it. It's not that unusual for a student in our area to have been introduced to Canvas at their high school, so that's helpful as well.
Great, and I think I'll get one final question in, because I thought this was interesting. If anyone wanted to share about their own experience, either being a first-gen student or working with first-gen students, and how this sort of influenced your practice. Sorry, Dr. Fisher.
I will jump in and just say, not practice, but I am technically a first generation college graduate, and I come from that perspective to this research project, and I'm very passionate about this work. And it resonates so much with personal experience through college. Right, and I think, unless Raquel, Tracy, Shalina, anything you'd like to add?
Can I just real quickly address a couple of questions? So Natalie had a question about the data coaches. So they work with our institutional research office. They're trained by the dean of our institutional research office, and they have monthly training meetings. They have a Canvas shell where information is loaded. They get spreadsheets in there that they can then manipulate to share with their teams. And they pull a lot of data from Navigate. And I see there's someone else who said they're just starting to implement Navigate. And I will tell that person, feel free to reach out if you'd like for some additional insight on Navigate implementation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tracy. And we are, I think, just about at time. I want to thank you all again for joining us today. Thank you, Tracy, Shalina, and Raquel, for bringing your expertise and sharing your stories from Cerritos College. It was very interesting, and we're going to learn so much more from you folks. Thank you so much. And have a good afternoon, everybody.